Okay, everybody, week 7. We are almost out of here. We are the end, as I put in the overview. The end is in sight. This week we're going to be covering chapter 14 and 15. Chapter 14 talks about bonds, so that's going to finish up our discussion of different types of investments. Different types of investment instruments. And then chapter 15, we'll talk about a different type of investing, which is real estate investments. There are 5 learning objectives in chapter 14 and 4 in chapter 15. Also, happy 4th of July. This week, hope that you enjoy your holiday. And so this week we're going to review chapters all the way 1 through 15 of the PowerPoints, read chapters 14 and 15 in your textbooks, do the chapter 14 and 15 problems, the 14 and 15 quiz, and the continuing case study for 14 and 15. And we'd have a one discussion board as normal. Getting ready for next week, week 8 is test number 4 will be open, and the final exam. So there's a lot to do in next week. Although, don't panic. Chapter 17 is only 8 pages long. It's very short, so it's not as much really reading to do as a normal week. So, all right, so let's get started, shall we? Well, let's talk about some bonds a little bit. We've mentioned bonds a couple of times before in our discussion of mutual funds and comparing them to stocks. But in bonds, the 5 learning objectives are: we're going to understand the basics of bond investments, describe the different types of bonds, explain how bonds are valued, evaluate the risks and returns of buying bonds, and plan where and how to buy bonds. So what actually is a bond? Whereas stock is where you buy ownership in a company, a bond is what's called a debt instrument that's issued by the government or by a company for the purpose of raising money for a specific purpose, such as funding extra construction, building a new project, growing the business. It's kind of like GoFundMe before GoFundMe was a thing. The difference is with GoFundMe, when you contribute to GoFundMe, usually you get like a product or like some kind of a stretch goal, dividend, or you get something for your money. In bonds, you are the lender, technically lending your money to either a government agency or to a company, and then they will pay you back with a premium on it at the end of a term. So it's a debt instrument. The business or the government's going into debt to you. You're giving them your money and loaning it to them, and then they're going to pay you back. So you're not buying anything in terms of like stock ownership. You're investing in the government with an idea that you're going to get paid back. The bond is the promise to repay the principal. So let's say you give them $1,000, along with interest, which is defined as what's called coupons, by a specified date, which is the maturity date of the bond. So, they're not as exciting as stocks because they don't move up and down as much, but they do provide a stable form of interest income. And it's part of a balanced portfolio, just like it's part of a balanced diet. No, it's part of a balanced portfolio because remember what we said, you need some steady, slow-moving, but not dangerous investments to go along with those stocks that may go up and down on a whim. Bonds usually pay interest about every 6 months. That's the coupons. And the bonds are worth their face value at maturity. So let's take a look. Here is where Boeing borrowed some money to build, I believe it was the Dreamliner is what they're talking about. And they borrowed at first $7 million, coupon 5%, maturity 3/15/2014, and there's the payout. First payment September 15th, 2009. They went back and issued another bond for $650 million, and then you had a third one for $500 million. This is 5 year, the 700 million is 5-year bonds, 10 years is 650 million, and 15 million, 15-year bonds is the 500 million. So it's for different levels of time. And you can see the maturity dates are different. There's 2014, 2019, and 2039 is the 15-year bond. Okay. This is an example of a bearer bond that has the coupons still attached to it. A bearer bond is kind of different in that, if you notice, this is issued by the state of South Carolina. It was originally was $1,000, and then there are coupons attached to it down at the bottom. A bearer bond is anybody who presents the bond. You don't see an owner name on there. Whoever has the bond in hand and presents it is entitled to the value of the bond and the associated interest. To get the interest, you would literally clip the little coupon. See the numbers down at the bottom, 39, 38, 37, 36. You would clip the coupons on the bottom of the bond and then have their bank send the interest coupon for collection. You clip off the coupon, give it to your bank. Your bank would turn it into the state of South Carolina in this instance and get the money, and it would go into your bank account. The numbers on the bottom represent interest coupons. So that's, like I said, 39, 38, whatever is showing down to 16. And so you would literally clip it every 6 months, or whatever, in accordance with the bond payout schedule. And when all the coupons were gone, you have collected all the interest you were going to collect, and then you could turn the $1,000 bond, the actual face of the bond, and get your $1,000 back. So you get your money back plus the interest. So how do bonds work? A bond with a face value of $10,000 purchased for $10,000 at 5% interest with a maturity of 10 years. Okay? So what this means is you're going to give some entity $10,000, and in 10 years you're going to get your $10,000 back, plus at every 6 months you're going to get an interest payment, a coupon if you will, of 5%. Interest payments every 6 months of $250, and at the end of the 10-year period you get your $10,000 back. And bonds can be bought and sold on the secondary market. So if you want your money back sooner, what you could do is you could say, okay, this bond doesn't mature for another 5 years, but I need $10,000 right now. If you'll give me $10,000, I'll go ahead and sell you the bond with the remaining coupons on it, and I'll get my $10,000 right this second because I need it. And in 5 years you'll get $10,000 plus every 6 months you get $250 for the value of the coupons, or however you want to work on it. It does have an inverse relationship with interest rates. Inverse meaning that as one goes up, the other goes down, or as one goes down, the other goes up, versus a direct relationship, whereas if the interest rate goes up, the rate of the value would go up. This is the inverse, as the interest rate goes up, the value of the bond probably goes down, and vice versa. So when interest rates go up, bond prices tend to fall, and when interest rates go down, bond prices tend to rise, and that's the inverse relationship of bond and interest. So if you have and the reason why is the payout of the coupon on the bond is fixed. So what you're talking about is opportunity cost. Remember we talked about opportunity cost, about choosing one thing over another. When an interest rate goes up and you're getting 5%, you're going to get 5% on that bond no matter what. So if the interest rate goes up above 5%, where you could make more than 5% investing somewhere else, your money's tied up in the bond and you're losing money. But if the interest rate falls down below where 5% is good, you're actually making more money. So that's why it's an inverse relationship. The closer the maturity rate for a bond, the more likely it is to be close to its original or its par value, because there's less time until maturity and less time for the bond to accrue interest. So my example of that would be somebody desperate who would sell it at the 5-year mark for $10,000. You might sell it for 15 because they're still going to get more than that with the coupons as it matures. But if you've only got like 3 coupons left to cut, that's only $250, $500, $750. You're probably going to have to get just $10,000 because they're going to want something for their profit. A call feature on a bond allows the user to buy back the bond from you before the maturity date. So whoever issued the bond, like the federal government or the state government or the city government or the company, if it's set up that way, you can do they could do a callback feature. And so what they're trying to do is, the call feature usually comes into play when that example that I gave you where the interest rate falls below the bond rate. So if they're paying 5% every 6 months, but the interest rate is now only 3%, they're going to call back those bonds and reissue them at 3% so they don't lose money. So, it's a way for companies to refinance their debt at a lower interest rate. But bondholders, of course, don't want to give up their high-paying bond without any compensation. And so the call feature will tell the bondholders what exactly will they receive if the call feature is exercised. You're going to get exactly this, to kind of allay their fears. Because people don't want to lose. Bonds are supposed to be very safe. You're not supposed to lose any money on bonds. Some types of bonds: federal government bonds, and there's a link to the to www.treasurydirect.gov to the U.S. Treasury, so you can see what kind of bonds are being offered. United States savings bonds, Treasury bills, notes, municipal bonds for cities and states, corporate bonds for companies to fund, like maybe opening a new plant or launching a new project, or something called junk bonds. And junk bonds are for smaller projects. They're a little bit more riskier. So, so U.S. saving bonds, introduced in 1935 by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. These were originally known as war bonds because their original purpose was to help the average citizen to finance the World War II war effort for the United States. They're called Series EE bonds, can be still purchased through www.treasurydirect.gov. My uncle had a lot of those. He was in the military for a very long time, and every paycheck he would buy the Series EE bonds. The paper EE savings bonds are sold at half their face values, so you could get them $50, $75, $100, $200, $500, $1,000, $5,000. But you could only do $5,000 maximum in one calendar year. The electronically issued EE savings bonds are sold at their face value. So whereas the paper EE savings bond, if you could get a $50 one for $25, if you're doing it online electronically, you have to pay $50 for a $50 bond. And again, $5,000 maximum purchase per year. But it's an easy way to get into bond ownership because you can do it literally as cheaply as $50 online or $25 if you go somewhere and actually buy it. Treasury bonds have a 30-year maturity rate, and they pay interest every 6 months. So for 30 years, every 6 months you get a little bit of money, and then at the end you get all your money back. Treasury bills are short-term, up to 52 weeks in maturity, so 52 weeks is a year, sold at a discount, and they mature at face value. So you pay less. So if you're buying $500 worth, you may pay $250 for it, but at the end you get your $500 at the end of the year, or however the percentage works. Treasury notes matures can go up to 10 years, so there's different maturity rates So it could be 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Pays interest every 6 months. And something called TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Insurance. Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. The principal is adjusted by changes in the Consumer Price Index. So that's Consumer Price Index is a listing of like the 94 most commonly purchased items in American households, and the Consumer Price Index is an indicator of inflation. So as the Consumer Price Index goes up, that means we're paying more for our stuff. If it goes down, we're paying less. So the TIPS is adjusted, the value is adjusted by changes in the Consumer Price Index. They do, just like everything else, pay every interest every 6 months, and you can get that with maturity times of 5, 10, or 15 years. I'm sorry, 5, 10, or 30 years. My apologies. And so there's, in the PowerPoint, there is a chart that does the comparison of the different kinds of bonds. I'll let you look at that on your own. Municipal bonds are what's called general obligation bonds. They're backed by the taxing authority of the municipality, so like the city or the county or the state. Revenue bonds are backed by the revenue generated by the project. So general obligation bonds would be like, we're going to fix the roads, or we're going to build a dam, or we're going to improve the electrical grid or something like that. Revenue bonds are backed by the revenue generated by the project. So a water plant being built would be repaid by fees that people are charged for the water. So you pay a fee for your water, and that helps, pays for the water plant. Municipal bonds, however, have a default risk because a municipality can declare bankruptcy, unlike the federal government, and they generally will carry insurance to offset the risk of, if they were to, like a small town, were to declare bankruptcy, they would have an insurance policy. They should have an insurance policy to offset any bond obligations that they may have. Corporate bonds, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Corporate bonds are issued by private and public corporations. Just like municipalities, corporations can declare bankruptcy, so therefore usually they will pay a little bit more risk premium in terms of a higher interest rate or higher coupon rate or what have you, to attract investors to buy their bonds. They are rated by Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor's. So that Standard & Poor's S&P, you can look on Standard & Poor's and find out what are the bond ratings. Is this a safe investment? Is this not a safe investment? They can be considered convertible bonds, which is hybrid with features of both debt and equity. And some of them have an option to convert to stock ownership. So when at maturity, you could take the money, or you could take stock equivalent and own part of the company. The advantage to the company is the company does not have to repay the debt obligation, but yet gives up some ownership through stock. In other words, if you give them the option to turn it into stock at the end of the bond maturity, the company's still not out money. They just hand over stock that may or may not be sold to somebody else. Because I could take the stock from the company and they'll go put it on the stock market and let somebody out in the world buy it, and the company is still not out the money. And the advantage for the bondholder is the ability to participate in the upside of a growing company and hopefully get increased returns. Okay. So, mentioned junk bonds a couple of times. There's a man named Michael Milliken. He's very famous. He's known as the junk bond king, and he popularized junk bonds as investments during the 1970s and the 80s. Junk bonds are considered below investment grade bonds, which is BB ranking or lower. The lower the rating, the more the company has to pay in terms of a risk premium, a high interest rate for investors to buy the bond, because it's a more dangerous, it's a sketchy investment. The company may not be solid. It may be a startup that's untried. It may be a new venture. It may be an offshoot. It may be a company that's emerging out of bankruptcy. But they're gonna pay you more interest to invest in them because it's a bigger risk to you. But the bigger risk to you is if they declare bankruptcy or go out of business, you've lost all your money. So it's the greater the reward, the greater the benefit, but the less likely it is you're going to get the reward. Remember the quote? So municipal and corporate bonds, there's a comparison chart in the PowerPoint on, it looks at municipal, corporate, convertible, and junk bonds, and they look at it by type, denomination, purchase price, purchase limit, the span of life, interest earnings, interest payment, redemption, taxes, what you have to do with taxes, what kind of risk, and how do you actually buy them. Okay. Valuation of bonds. We've talked about Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch rate the creditworthiness of companies, municipalities, states, and nations. So they do a whole bond, they do the gamut of bond offerings. And they issue kind of like a credit rating, like we talked about, where you get a credit score. They do a credit rating to help determine the interest rates on bonds. The lower the rating, the higher the interest. The higher the rating, the lower the interest, because the higher the rating, the safer the company, and the more likely it is you're going to actually get some money. Okay? So when you do your research on bond investments, as with everything, when you're talking about giving up your money, decide on investment objective and time horizon. Do I want my money quickly, or do I mind letting it sit for 10, 15, 20, 30 years? Compare the interest rates and the risk-free rate, which is treasury bonds, and see which one is the most advantageous for you. Read what reports have been submitted on the companies by the rating agencies and compare. Do your best to predict the future, looking at other economic indicators, because what drives it? Well, our economy drives it in terms of what does our interest rate look like? Is our money strong against foreign currency? Is unemployment trending up? Is it trending down? Are businesses opening or are they closing? So look at other economic indicators to see if you think it's going to be a time of increase or a time of decrease. Is it going to be a bull market or a bear market? And use a bond screener to help you filter out good choices and bad choices. And we have a chart that has the bond ratings. It goes from AAA for Moody's, long-term, short-term. Long-term is like AAA, AA1, AA2, all the way down to CA. So it's like level A, level B, level C, and it's lower as it goes through the alphabet. And then short-term bonds would be, for Moody's, would be listed as a P1, a P2, a P3, or not prime. Standard & Poor's does the AAA, the AA plus, the plain AA, the A minus, the A plus, the A minus, triple B plus, all the way down to a D, and that's a junk bond. It's in default, actually. Short-term bonds, they do A1 plus, A1, A2, A3, B, C. Fitch does AAA through the letters all the way down to D, some sort of D rating, triple D, double D, D. And their short-term bonds are A1 plus, A1, A2, A3, B, and C. And the ratings, the higher ratings, like the AAA, all the way down to like AA minus or AA3 if you're Moody's. That's AAA is prime. Those are your best bonds. High grade is anything down to like AA minus or A3 if you're Moody's. P1, A1 plus. Those are good stocks. Medium grade, upper medium grade is the next level. Then lower medium grade is still like A3, and P3s and stuff like that. And triple B minuses for Fitch, and Baa3 for Moody's, and triple B minus for Standard & Poor's. And then non-investment grade or speculative. When you start saying speculative, you're speculating on whether it will make money for you or not. So once you get to like with Fitch, BB plus down to B minus, for Standard & Poor's also BB plus down to B minus, for Moody's it's BA1 down to B3, you're looking at speculative risk. This means that there is a problem, and it's considered non-investment grade. The first part is considered speculative, and then it goes to highly speculative, which is really dangerous. And then once it gets down to the C's, it's listed as either substantial risk, extremely speculative, or at the lower end, in default with little prospect for recovery. And then once you get to letter D, it's in default. They're no good. Don't buy. Okay, so a bond screener is electronic, and you put in your criteria. There's a sample there on the screen in the PowerPoint, and it will help you find bonds that meet your criteria. A bond online report. There's a sample of one in the PowerPoint and in the textbook. This is a U.S. Treasury bond, and it goes, how far out: 3 months, 6 months, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, 30 year maturity rates. What is the yield for yesterday, last week, and last month? And you can see there are slight changes depending upon what's going on. And a yield curve is listed, and you can see how it flattens out over time. So bond value, some terms you need to think about. Yield is the interest rate on the bond. What is your interest rate? Yield to maturity is the interest rate received when between the date you buy the bond and the date it is repaid, including all payouts, coupons, and capital gains and losses. Remember, you can buy the bonds on the secondary market, so you may not get full yield value if you jump in late. When a bond is, when you hear the term called, the bond is repaid earlier than its maturity date. Remember I said that the company can, if the interest rate falls below the stated interest rate, the company can recall it. Well, when you call a bond in, you've called in the bonds and you're going to pay them off early. Yield to call, interest rate received between now and early repayment date, because they'll usually tell you, hey, in 2 months we're going to call these bonds. Coupon yield is the coupon rate, and that's the interest rate paid on the bond as a percentage of the bond's current price, and it's stated, in the paperwork of the bond. And so there's another chart about the bond screener results. It tells you the price, the interest paid annually on the bond, the coupon rate or the percentage rate, what is the maturity date, what interest you will receive if the bond is bought today and held to maturity, the annual interest divided by the current price, and what is the rating. The Fitch's rating is what this one is using. So remember we said the BBB is getting into the danger zone. BBB is lower medium grade for Fitch. So, A, AAA, some of them are BB. None of those on the example are listed as in default, because you wouldn't want those anyway. Some of them you see are not rated, so they must be small. Albany, New York, Individual Development Agency, Civic Revenue Bonds. Okay, the city of Albany is doing something like with the roads or something like that. Bay Area Toll Authority of California toll bridge bond, so they're building a bridge or fixing a bridge. They're not rated because they're small. Is it callable? Yes or no? That's good to know. So there's a math problem about calculating the value of a bond. This looks very confusing. C is the annual coupon payment in dollars. R is the interest rate, yield to maturity. Y, capital Y, is the number of years to maturity. Capital B is the par value or the face value. And P, capital P, is the purchase price. So the annual coupon payment in dollars times 1 plus the interest rate to the -1 exponent, sub-exponent, plus coupon. Oh, okay, I see what you're doing. It's the years. So -1, -2, minus Y, number of years to maturity. So you have to do it for a certain number of years. -1 year, -2 years, minus a year, and then the par value times the interest, 1 plus the interest rate minus the year equals the purchase price. That's confusing. I would suggest that you use a calculator, or they do have charts for that. Accounting for taxes. Some bonds are exempt from federal tax. Some bonds are exempt from state tax. If you're helping the state out, usually they'll give you a break. If you're helping the federal government out, they usually give you a break. Some bonds are exempt from both, because with some bonds, if it's a particular bond, you may not have to pay federal tax, but you have to pay state, and vice versa. You may not have to pay state, but you have to pay federal. But some bonds say you don't have to pay any. Some bonds say you got to pay both. So please be careful. What are the advantages of tax-exempt bonds? Well, the immediate advantage is you don't have to pay any taxes on them. And who do these bonds benefit? Well, they benefit, obviously, the person who's issuing them, the entity who's issuing them, but they, in the end of the day, they also benefit you, because you're getting the money free and clear without having to pay taxes on it. That's, $10,000 you've stashed away for a certain number of years, you're getting interest on it, you're not having to pay taxes on it. Ta-da. Okay. Benefits of bonds are that they don't experience the craziness of the stock market, the wild ups and downs that a stock could go at any point in time. A bond pays a fixed amount of interest every 6 months, and then at maturity you get your money back unless they call it early. As an investment strategy, you can build what's called a bond ladder in buying bills and notes and bonds, and they mature in different years. So you get some money here, and then 5 years later you get another infusion there. When you're thinking about retirement, you could build the ladder such that a certain number of bonds matures every year of your retirement, so that you get a cash infusion of bond money at the beginning of every year while you're retired. And you're buying them while you're working, so it's not as difficult to give up the money then. Because bonds are repaid or redeemed on their maturity date, they're safer than stock, because a stock purchase technically is never repaid. You either make money on it, or you lose money on it, or you hold on to it. So it would be very serendipitous for you to sell a bond at exactly the same price that you bought it, because it'd have to actually be selling for that price. And so there is a chart that illustrates that bond ladder that I was talking about. You put your initial investment in year 1, and something in year 2, and something in year 3, and then maybe you're getting something. You reinvest year 1. If it's a 1-year bond, you reinvest it in year 2 for 2 or 3 more years, and you keep going until it's time to start reaping the benefits of it. Okay. Now, understand that it's never 100% guaranteed that the issuer won't default on its debt, but government bonds, municipalities have declared bankruptcy, so corporations, even foreign governments, have failed to make payments on their bonds. But if you do your homework well and you choose wise investments, you're lowering the risk of losing money by going through bonds. Interest rate, liquidity, inflation, and call risk are things that do happen with bonds. So, understand you're playing the odds with it, and you want to make sure to pay attention to what's going on. Investing in bond mutual funds spreads the risk among government, corporate, and mortgage-backed bonds, because you're in that pool again, like your mutual fund with your stocks. Short-term bonds are considered the least risky because of the turnaround time. They're not talking about giving a municipality or a corporation 10 years to go bankrupt. There is, you're relatively holding the money for a short period of time. And long-term bonds generally have a higher interest rate, but are considered riskier because their prices can be fairly volatile over the 10-year period, and there's the option that they could call them in. There's all kinds of things that could happen. So balancing your risk with bonds, go and try to get into a bond mutual fund because it diversifies. You have, just like with the mutual funds with your stocks, you have a professional funds manager, and there is some extra expenses and cost involved in it versus doing it yourself, but you've got somebody to take care of it for you. In your own portfolio, if you're doing it yourself, make sure you have varying bond rates and have a variety of bonds. Diversify it yourself so that you're not all tied to one corporation or one industry. Get you some government bonds, get you some corporate bonds. If you expect the interest rate to decline, invest heavier in long-term bonds, because as the interest rate declines, the price will increase as long as they don't call them, okay? A passive strategy for investment in bonds is get you a diversified portfolio of bonds that are held for a long period of time, generates interest income in the form of coupon payments, which you could then turn into either savings or stock investments or reinvestment into other bonds, whatever, or you could just spend them. There's some people I know of that they don't have a job because their ancestors or parents or whomever you want to say, grandparents, invested heavily into bonds, and now the younger generation, they don't have to work because the bonds are all coming to maturity, and they've got the coupons, and they're getting a paycheck every 6 months, and it's enough to where they don't really even have to have a job. It's actually quite wild. I know a person who lives that way. I ain't mad at him, but I'm mad at him sometimes because I had to get him to go to work. Just kidding. Not kidding. Just kidding. Anyway. But that it could be done. I know somebody who does it. They live off of investments, and that's fine. You need to get a targeted strategy. Align the maturity date with the savings goal so that your principal, when you get your principal back, it's at the right time that you need it. So, like I said, with that ladder, you get them where they are staggered out, where you get the principal back during retirement. Or let's say you want to buy bonds that mature when your oldest child is going away to college. Maybe they're 3 years old and you buy a 15-year bond to help fund their college or something like that. You can do it. You just got to figure it out. It just depends on what you want. Okay. Where do you actually buy bonds? Well, buy U.S. Treasury bonds online at www.treasurydirect.gov. There's a link in the PowerPoint. Buying and selling corporate bonds is harder than buying and selling stocks. Bonds tend to trade only every few days and have fewer buyers and sellers. And there's a thing to the Wall Street Journal about bonds, a link there. And you can buy and sell bonds in the secondary market before bonds reach maturity. You need to go through a broker and pay a transaction fee, which reduces the yield. But you still get some bonds. And some bonds are traded on stock exchanges, and others are traded in the over-the-counter market. So you have to kind of keep your eye out for them. It's almost like going to a thrift shop or somewhere where you just happen to find it. Okay, so that is chapter 14, bonds. So let's take a look at another form of investment, which is real estate. A lot of people like to invest in real estate. And that is another way people make their money, investing in real estate. They own property and they manage it. It can be done. So there are 4 learning objectives in this chapter. Understand the different types of real estate investments. Contemplate the benefits and drawbacks of owning rental property. Discover how to grow a real estate portfolio through real estate investment trust, and evaluate the risk and returns involved in short-term real estate investments. Now, if you've been following along as we should have in the case study, that's something that the parents of the students have done. They bought that house as a rental property. They bought it initially for their children to live in, but they're renting out the extra rooms as a stream of income to pay for the house and to pay for repairs and everything like that. And that's how the rental process works. 1991 to 2015. It looks like the monthly house price index for the United States was hovering somewhere around 200,000 at the end of December 2014. Let's just take a look. Housing price index. Well, they want a zip code. Let's just do a zip code for Methodist University. Zip code 28311. Oh no, I don't want that. I'm sorry. I wanted the general list. I didn't want somebody to come here and look at my property to try to sell it like Zillow or something like that. U.S. housing. Here we go. The U.S. house prices rose 0.1% in February, according to U.S. Federal Housing seasonally adjusted monthly house price index. They rose 3.9% from February 2024 to February 2025. Do we have a chart? House price is negative 0.8% in Pacific to positive 1.3% in New England, positive 0.9% in Pacific Division to 7+% in Middle Atlantic Division. I'm looking for a chart. This is the Federal Housing Finance Agency website where I'm at, by the way. Okay, so the state ranked number 1 in housing values is currently Connecticut. And the state ranked lowest is Mississippi. We look like we're about halfway in the middle with North Carolina. Maybe in the lower third. It's not numbered, it's just got the rows. But that's interesting, something to see. That's interesting. So it looks like housing prices are, as we knew, were going up if you're in the housing market. Real estate is defined as land and permanent buildings on the land. Your home is your primary residence. Your rental property may be somewhere where you own it and rent it out to somebody else. And land is just land with no buildings on it. A mobile home is not considered real estate. It's literally considered a vehicle because it could be moved if necessary. It's actually titled like a car versus deeded like a house. So houses, apartments, farmland, commercial property, you can buy the real estate and lease it out to somebody else or rent it out to somebody else or use it yourself. A lease is defined as a contract that stipulates the use and possession of property for a specified time and a fixed number of payments. In order to make money on real estate, you need to estimate your return on investment. An easy way to start investing in real estate, if that's something you want to do, is to buy a duplex, which is one house but divided into 2 apartments, rent out half and live in the other half. And it can provide tax benefits, because you get to deduct legitimate expenses associated with the rental property. I would get a tax professional to fill out my taxes. Once you start using business, though, real estate can get all kinds of crazy about with ins and outs. Make sure you don't want to run afoul of the Internal Revenue Service with your taxes. So a real estate investment trust, or an REIT, is a pooled fund that invests in real estate. Many REITs invest in commercial property. So you may have like a family of people who pool their money together, and they buy some land and build like a small shopping center, or they build an apartment complex or something. But it's a real estate investment trust that's the overarching entity owned by a family, or it doesn't have to even be family, just a group of people, but they have joined together and legally made what's called a real estate investment trust. There's a thing, I'm sure you've probably seen this or heard of this, where you flip properties. The definition of flipping a property is you buy an undervalued property, a house that may be fallen down or had been damaged or not taken care of. You update it, make necessary repairs and modifications, and you sell it for a profit. The thing with flipping a property is you want to do it as fast as possible. If you've ever seen any of these shows where people are flipping these houses, they want that stuff done quickly, because if you start making payments on it, every time you make a payment, you're losing money. If you could buy a house, let's say you buy a house that's like a dump and it's cheap, and you spend $25,000 for it, which I know is low, but it could happen, okay? You spend $25,000 on it, and you put $50,000 in it, so now it's worth you spent $75,000, the $25,000 to buy it and the $50,000 to fix it. But you can, within 1 month, you could sell it for $125,000. You've now made $50,000 before you've had to pay a mortgage payment on it, or maybe you could even get away with having the contractors and stuff bill you, and you could pay them out of the profits as well if you flip it fast enough. But if you start holding on to it and paying mortgages and having to pay off contractors, you're eating into your own personal money, to where you don't make enough money. You're not making as much money on the flipping of the house. The beauty of flipping houses is to do it quickly. You got to get in there, get it fixed, and get out. Okay. Measuring ROI, return on investment. Return on investment is calculated by today's price, PT, price today, purchase price, PO, and C is cost of ownership. So ROI equals a bracket, price today minus, in parentheses, purchase price plus any kind of cost of ownership, divided by, close your parentheses and everything, divided by purchase price. So that's why I'm saying you want to get in and you want to get out so you can maximize your return on investment. Okay? Now, there is some ROI real estate investment calculators online, and there is a link in the PowerPoint to take you there. So I would do that rather than try to do that math, but that's how you calculate ROI. Advantages and disadvantages of owning rental property, not real estate, rental property. The advantage is there are tax advantages because you get to write off things. It's passive income because technically, as long as, other than keeping it upkeep, if you get a good rental tenant in there where they're going to take care of the home, you're fine, because they're not in there tearing your stuff up. And home ownership, real estate, and land, if nothing else, will appreciate. It grows in value. The house may depreciate, but the land appreciates, so you get some tax advantages. Some disadvantages is the house will depreciate, especially if you have somebody in there that's not taking care of your stuff. You may get a renter that doesn't pay you on time, or defaults on their payment. Then you have to go through the courts to get them evicted. And if you have unoccupied property, you're sitting there maybe paying a mortgage on it, but the rent's not coming in, and so that's you're just paying out money for an empty house at that point in time. A lot of people get into rental property where they maybe they bought a house and then they have to move. This happens a lot in Fayetteville because of the military. They bought a house somewhere else, and now the military stationed them in Fayetteville, and so they are either trying to rent or buy a house here, but they're renting out their house where they used to live, and what they're hoping to do is get enough money in rent at the house where they used to live to at least cover the mortgage until they could sell it. And then they would only have to, they're really only coming out of pocket for the one domicile, not both. That happens quite a bit. You know, you want to, if you're buying a piece of property, and you're trying to do rent on it, you need to get at least enough rent to cover your costs. So that way, you know, if once the property's paid for, your rent is basically free money unless something tears up. And like I said, if you get a really good tenant, you could have somebody that stays in there for years and just takes care of the place. Areas to manage as a landlord. It's a little wheel color little thing. Getting a written contract is one of the last statements. I say, let's start with tenant screening. You want to do your best to get somebody in there that's had a history, just like, you know, run a credit check on them, just like if you were selling them a car or something. If they've had a history of defaulting on expenses, they're not going to pay you either. Okay. Budgeting expenses, making sure that what you put into your rental property is nice, but how nice? I mean, it depends on what you're renting. If you're renting a mansion, of course, it has to be top tier. If you're just renting a regular house, you don't have to put the most expensive of everything in there. You just make sure that everything works. You need to purchase insurance on it, because if it were to burn down, it would be a loss. What's the cost of advertising for the rental? Do you go through an agency, or do you just put a sign out front? What type of communication are you going to have with the people who are wanting to rent and once they become your tenant? Getting a home checklist to walk through with your tenants to make sure that they understand what you expect. Setting rules, again, creating expectations. Maintenance and repairs. Who's responsible for what? Are they going to cut the grass and then you give them a little bit of break on the rent, or are you having to get the grass cut for them? You know, that kind of stuff. Resolving disputes informally. You don't want to have to run to court for every single thing. You like to have a relationship with them where if something goes wrong, you go talk it out, just like regular people. But it's always a good idea to have a written contract. That way, everything is on the up and up. Okay? And then there's a little chart about what we just talked about. Tenant screening, have a consistent policy, do not discriminate, check credit scores. Budgeting your expenses, make sure that what you make covers taxes, insurance, mortgage payment, and maintenance costs. Maintenance repairs, if you can do it yourself, you save money, or you can hire it out. Understand that you can receive calls 24/7. I guarantee you what's going to happen is the heater's going to go out like right at Christmas time or something when it's cold in the middle of the night, okay? And the air conditioner will break on the hottest day of the year. Protect property from losses by purchasing insurance, and I would encourage my tenants to purchase renter's insurance. I would just let them know, hey, this is what my insurance covers. If you want your stuff covered, you need to get yourself some renter's insurance. And advertising, do you do newspaper? Do you do online? Do you just put up signs, word of mouth? You know, what do you do? Maintain a good communication relationship with your tenants. Try to resolve disputes informally. Before a tenant moves in or moves out, go over the home checklist with them to make sure before they move in. That way they know, look, that hey, that was broken before they moved in. They didn't break it, or you know, this wall was scuffed or whatever. And use your security deposit for repairs if they tear something up. Rules for tenants: don't discriminate is number one against them. People will take you to court for discrimination in a heartbeat. And please do get a lease, get it in writing. And don't go to court without some kind of a contract. So shared ownership. You can do this with, you know, anything, but with real estate, you can go into a partnership or an S Corp or LLC and shared ownership with real estate, especially if you're owning commercial spaces. You may, because of liability issues, diversity of skills, and lack of capital, you may want to add other people to your real estate investments. If you have at least 2 people or more with a formal contract, you can set up a partnership. Very easy to get into, Once a partner leaves, it breaks. You have to reform with the rest of the partners, or bring a new partner in and reform. But once somebody dies or leaves the partnership, it's broken. You have to redo it. You share the profits and the losses, and it flows through to your individual tax returns. An S corporation provides limited liability because the corporation can be sued, but not the owners. A partnership, if the partnership is sued, everything you own could be on the line, so you need to be careful with that. An S corporation does provide you the limited liability. The income passes to both the losses and the income passes to shareholders and are paid through the personal taxes, just like a partnership. Or an LLC is kind of like an S corporation, provides limited liability, and the income goes to the partners or the shareholders via personal taxes and the losses. And then there's a big chart about all different kinds of shared ownership that compares partnerships, S corps, and limited liability companies. And we talked about the real estate investment trust. It's like a closed-end mutual fund. If you're not invited and part of the initial thing, you can't just buy into it. Equity, REIT, REITs, I guess, invest money directly in the property. Mortgage REITs invest in mortgage loans that finance properties. That's the difference. Equity is ownership. Mortgage is borrowing money. So think about it that way. Before you start investing in these REITs, do your homework, read the prospectus, talk to a professional about it, see if it's traded on an exchange, and please be wary of scams because people will take your money and go. To avoid scams, research the history of the REIT, consult a tax consultant, have an attorney review the paperwork, and always be aware of too good to be true offers. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I always advise anybody who is going to be investing any sort of money to have an accountant, an attorney, an insurance person on retainer, so that you can have somebody working for you to talk to you about the risk, and a financial advisor, those four, to talk about the different risks and rewards that you will be facing. We mentioned about flipping real estate. Acquiring, it's defined as requiring real estate at a discount, which is normally 20% below the market value. Leverage is your favor for a higher ROI. Leverage, though, can be a double-edged sword because, like I said, you need to find the property, you need to fix it up, and you need to resell it quickly, okay? So some successful steps for flipping real estate is get real estate in a growing area. Try to find something that's distressed or perhaps in foreclosure, or go to an estate sale and pick up something. It's better to have the cheapest house in a more expensive neighborhood than have the more expensive house in a cheap neighborhood, because it's always based on neighborhood average price. So if you have the most expensive house in a really cheap neighborhood, you're not going to get the money for it that you would if you had a cheaper house in a really expensive neighborhood. Fix up the property to add value. Resell the property as soon as possible. Use multiple listing services or MLSs to get the word out. Get real estate license so that you can be the listing agent, and then you receive a commission on the sale if you're going to do this for a living. And make a good relationship with a banker so that you can have turnaround time and have somebody that you can call and get some paperwork going. So that is chapter 15, and that is week number 7. So as I said, basically this week is these 2 chapters. The chapter, different work for the different chapters, the problems, the quizzes, and the continuing case studies. Go ahead and start looking ahead because you have the final 2 chapters, test number 4, and the final exam next week. And I will be back with you soon. Thank you. Goodbye.